this off, I'll just do a run through. So one thing that's not listed on the agenda, but that we will be doing under my, I suppose under my time to report out as a subcommittee chair, I want to walk you all through a little bit of information about a new dashboard that's being developed that's going to work alongside some of the traditional housing data methods that we use to report out. So if folks recall, there's housingdata.org, which VHFA maintains. And then now the administration is developing another dashboard that's going to work alongside that. So I'm going to spend a little time walking through that because this council is tasked with monitoring housing production, setting targets. But as you may recall, we decided since the administration was going to be doing that work and spending time and money to contract for that, that we would piggyback onto that. So anyway, I'm going to talk a bit about that work and a bit about that dashboard. So just so you know, that's not listed on the agenda, but that is something that we'll be doing today. So why don't we start? Do we hear a motion or any changes for a motion to approve or changes for the last meeting's minutes? I like to imagine that everybody's going through it with their red marker right now, marking it up. Does everybody have the last meeting's minutes in front of them? Or do we need to send, we could always send those out and then table that till later. Okay, let's do that. We'll send out the minutes. I don't think that's the most important thing on the agenda. All right, before we move into public comment, I want to open it up to my co-chair, Chris. Any comments on the end of the last tactical action plan, start of the new one, or the coming session?
No, thank you, Alex. I will keep it brief this morning and just, once again say this is an amazing assembly of experts and people from so many different parts of the housing and homelessness continuum here. And we all appreciate your time and the effort that you're putting into these meetings. I've been working in the one subcommittee that you'll hear a report on later, and I'm kind of just in awe of some of the ideas and the hard work going on there, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the other subcommittees today, as well as the housing dashboard presentation that you're about to do, Alex. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Just looking at the agenda, I think I'm probably just gonna do that. We'll run through those slides a little bit sooner here, just so that we can keep public comment at the specified time of 9:30-ish. Before I do that, I do want to open it up to anybody on the council before I jump into this presentation on data. If folks have any announcements they want to make or items they want to put on coming agendas or make sure that we cover. Okay. Well, at any point throughout the meeting today, please feel free to jump in if you think of something, or just shoot us a note if you want to make sure something gets added to the agenda. So I am going to share my screen in a minute here. So what I want to do first is talk a bit about housingdata.org, because this is a resource that I cannot send people to enough. The housing needs assessment that you all may have heard about, that's a HUD requirement. It is essentially the explanation of what housing we need, not just the number of units, but also what types, what the shortfalls are between 2025 and 2029. This is something that we do as a HUD, federal HUD requirement every 5 years. Anyway, I bring up the housing needs assessment because while that gets plenty of attention when it comes out, we have this tremendous resource that offers all of that data and more regularly updated by the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. And so you'll see my screen pop up here. Really just so much information about housing, what our renters are experiencing, what our homeowners are experiencing, You can see median rent depending on the bedroom size. You can also see all of these things for the most part. You can see by county or town. So when I talk to communities and they're trying to get a sense of what they ought to be building, or they're trying to set goals for their community, I always point them to this resource because they can get a really clear sense of what the housing reality is on the ground just by going through this website. This is another great tool, housing price affordability calculator. Anyway.
What was the base year?
I'm sorry?
What was the base year?
The base year for this, it's slightly different on all of them. Some of these are 2023, and then some are kept current throughout 2024. So it'll usually say, so let's go to building permits. And actually, I want to go to building permits because this is going to relate to what we're going to discuss next. So, hi, welcome. So this is an example of some data that is only updated annually. I do want to spend a moment talking about building permits. So as you know, there's a lot of interest right now in measuring our progress on housing and trying to get a good sense of whether the changes that we've made over the last few years are having the impact that we desire, which is more housing units. Part of that too is just an analysis of why we ended up here. When you look at this chart, you can get a pretty good sense of why we ended up where we are, which is that once upon a time, we built a fair amount and we kept up with our housing needs. And then decades of decline in that rate have put us where we are today. My friend Maura Collins, who couldn't join us today because she's at a conference in DC, has commented often. In fact, we're presenting to the legislature. We're giving the legislative briefing last week, Gus Seelig and Maura and I. And one of the questions we got from legislators was, why didn't we have a housing crisis 5 years ago? I really love when I get that question because we did. And a lot of folks that operate in the housing space, probably a lot of people on this call, knew that we had a housing crisis 5 years ago. Rather, housing shortage, I think, is probably better use. But it wasn't as apparent. And as Maura points out, the folks on the lowest end of the economic spectrum are the folks that are the first to be hurt when there's housing shortage. And so people on that side of the economic spectrum were feeling it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But as you can see here, the decline in production and the growing shortage, as it started affecting more working class people, then more middle income people, and more folks who were trying to come back and work here, even including folks in white collar jobs, it starts to get more attention. That's a sad reality, but it is a reality that as more folks across the economic spectrum are impacted, we started to acknowledge this housing shortage more. So we've had the shortage. Is it more acute now, perhaps, than 5 years ago? Absolutely. But a train has been barreling toward us for years. Now, I'm still on this building permit screen because every year people are really, really interested, especially throughout the legislative session, finding out what are we building? What's our progress? What's in the pipeline? What's coming? And we can't clearly tell anyone. Now, my team, Maura's team, Kathleen's team, and Gus's team, we can all look at where we put project-based vouchers from BSHA, CDBG money from my team, the VHDB money from Gus's shop, and we can look at LIHTC credits from Maura's. And in that space, we know what's coming online. We know it's being built, but that's only a small portion of what's being built. As you can see, I mean, let's just take 2023, just under 2,500 units permitted, according to this. Well, we know that several hundred of those came from our funding sources, but the rest were private builders or maybe someone building their own single family home, things that would never be reported to us. And so we have to wait until the end of a calendar year. And then we wait until May after that calendar year, and we find out what was built in the previous year. So just so folks know, for 2024, in 5 months, we'll know what was built in 2024. That's a problem. And especially in a time where we are now really paying a lot of attention to data. We're paying a lot of attention to what we ought to be building. And now my department is tasked with setting housing targets. Folks are going to want to be able to see throughout the year, how are we doing? And within the legislative session, we're going to want to be able to react to that and determine whether we need to add some more incentives, more tools, loosen up regulations, whatever it takes to add housing. So we talked to the Agency of Digital Services, the AI team at the state. We talked to the mapping team and just explained this conundrum. And just really what we presented to them was we have a bunch of different touch points at the state where there is some sort of data. When a house is being built, it needs to be reported to the E911 board. The tax department is going to find out through their the grand list. There's a bunch of these different touch points that it's really hard to bring them together, but we presented this challenge to the Agency of Digital Services, and they sought to undertake that to give us a sense in somewhat real time what's being built throughout the year, and then ideally down the road, what's in the pipeline? What can we expect to come on in the next 6 to 12 months? And so I'm gonna share some slides that walk through this new, what we're calling the new housing dashboard. And it's still under construction, so it's not accessible by the public quite yet. But I want you all to be aware of this, and I want you all to know how it ties in with the targets. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Okay, so as I walk through this, I want to be clear. All credit goes to Vermont's Agency of Digital Services, John Adams with VCGI, and Josiah Raish, our AI director for the state. They've worked together on this, and it's really incredible what they and their teams have put together here. Oops. We've talked about this goal, just accurately measuring new housing units being developed statewide. We say accurately, that means with a little bit more precision than building permit data. For awareness, the way we get that data is through the U.S. Census Bureau. It's voluntarily supplied to the Census Bureau by our municipalities. And fortunately, we have a really high rate of participation by our municipalities. So we get a fairly good picture of what's being produced, but we know some municipalities aren't really able to report data in that way because their systems just don't work like that. So we know we're missing some things. So when you go onto this dashboard, this is what you'll see. And I'll explain some of these, the different thumbnails here, but this gives you a flavor of the different ways you can look at housing data. So I'm going to move fairly quickly through the process stuff, but just so you know, there was a long, extensive process of trying to sort out what points we could tap into existing data so that we didn't need to create something new or something burdensome on our municipalities. So you can see here, there's a bunch of different data sources that were explored, and the most reliable one, or the one with the most opportunity going forward, is E911 data. And I want to say that board has been really great in looking to try to scale up, expand what they're doing, expand and alter the way they collect data. So everything I hear from John and Josiah is that they've been a great partner. So credit to them as well. To expand on this data, this dashboard will also, pending sort of an in-progress partnership with University of Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab, they'll be using satellite data. So the spatial analysis data will take imagery from satellites that are passing overhead multiple times a day, multiple times a week, and depending on cloud cover, getting clear pictures and being able to see changes in the landscape and actually picking up on construction activity where maybe it's not necessarily being reported through our traditional systems because sometimes it doesn't need to be. So anyway, this is a really exciting aspect of this dashboard. And this touches on what I think is really important about this. This dashboard is going to bring in multiple sources, cross-reference them, check them against one another to try to make sure that the data is as accurate as possible and that we're starting to get a more holistic sense of what's happening out there. So just to give a sense of this spatial analysis data, this is what you would see in terms of identifying building footprints, and this is part of how new structures and new construction will be identified. And so this complements the E911 data by starting to fill in where either there's incomplete E911 data or for whatever reason, just it just hasn't been reported to that board yet. So they're really rounding this out. There's some opportunities to add further data sources, as I mentioned before. So the tax department has some shortcomings in their data right now, but they are going through, they're looking at a software upgrade or at least an update to their software. And there's a chance that they can make some adjustments to bring certain data points in there that we need, like reporting number of residential units and, being able to pair that with the grand list data. It'll give us a clear sense of where units are and what they look like. So like I said, this is what you'll see when you get onto the dashboard. And if you look up across the top, you can see there's a few thumbnails, and what we're looking at right now is the new housing units page. So there's a lot on here, and what I'm going to say is some of what you're seeing are placeholder numbers. Specifically on the left, you'll see big 1,822. That's what so far is calculated as the new housing units so far in 2024, but that was as of, I believe, October when they pulled this image. But more importantly, I want to point you towards just down below it, you'll see target 4846. That's a placeholder. So this is where this dashboard is going to interact with the targets that our team in coordination with VHFA and the regional planning commissions are establishing right now. So those targets are being developed, they're underway. This is as a result of the Home Act and Act 181, our task to make sure that there are both statewide housing production targets for 2025 and 2050 and regional targets for those same timelines. Now, the regional planning commissions are going to do the work of bringing those down to the town level so that towns will have insights into what their targets are. They'll be able to see that annualized as well as what they need to or what they ought to hit by 2030 and 2050. Just so this council is aware, and you'll likely be able to see this. Yeah, you'll be able to see these targets at the next council meeting. We'll walk through these. And I think Leslie from VHFA, I could probably talk her into presenting because her and her team really did the analysis to create those. But there's going to be sort of a lower target, and we can describe what that scenario is. It'll certainly help improve the health of the housing market, but not achieve all of the aims we have. And then a higher housing target where we explain essentially this will help ideally eradicate, for the most part, homelessness. I say eradicate with a clear understanding of the other realities there. It'll improve the vacancy rates. It'll improve the workforce shortages. So once you see what those targets are, you'll understand that we lay out different scenarios, and communities will be able to see those, and they'll be able to set their sights on what they think is both achievable and the best thing for their community. So anyway, that's where this dashboard interacts with those targets. Is ideally throughout the year, we'll now be able to see how progress is tracking. And on the bottom left, there's sort of a speedometer. In this just hypothetical scenario that we're looking at here, right? These are placeholder numbers. We're only hitting 38% of our target as of, let's say this was October. So we know we're falling well behind. Ideally, in years to come, as our land use changes and our investments work their way through the system, maybe we'll start to see that speedometer tick up so that by October, we're looking at 80% of our target being achieved. And maybe there's some things we can do to steer investment to tick that up towards the end of the year, and make real-time decisions about our housing. So in the top right, you can see, like with housingdata.org, there's going to be a goal to make sure that folks can filter this down to county, to their town, adjust the years. So you can see right now some of the numbers on the right that's showing 2019 through 2024 production, and you can see it by county. So being able to toggle is one of the objectives here. Down at the bottom right, you'll be able to filter and it'll adjust the map, as you can see, as well as that image at the bottom right to show, in this case, just single family housing production, which you can see on the map is pretty even distribution across the state, which is nice to see. Oops, that's what I wanted to show. So 2019 to now, pretty even distribution of single family construction throughout the state, which is probably not too much of a surprise. Nor is this, that multifamily construction is largely concentrated in Chittenden County, a little bit in Franklin County, some up in Lamoille near likely Morrisville. You can see down by White River Junction, and then Brattleboro and Bennington. So probably not a huge surprise to anyone that, places like Rutland, Burlington, Morrisville are seeing most of the multifamily construction between 2019 and now, because that's what's visible. That's what, when we're driving around, we can see that in our downtowns. And then bringing it together in a heat map, just showing where most of those units are coming online. Again, you can see a lot of that, the Washington, Lamoille, Chittenden corridor, seeing a lot of the growth there. So to talk a bit more about the E911 data and the potential here, pointing towards development sites. So this is one of the ways that we may be able to start getting insights into what's coming in the pipeline before it's actually constructed. And so a development site in the E911 data is essentially where someone has planned for, say, a subdivision or construction of a unit, but construction has yet to start. And so you can see a couple examples of a development site here. These are actual development sites plotted on the map. What's missing from the data right now are things like, when are these planned to come online? Perhaps has this been abandoned? Are folks still planning to build here? So in the case of these two images, you can see, especially on the left, this is very clearly a subdivision, and this will get built out. On the right is, if folks are familiar with the Kennedy the Kennedy Road, the O'Brien Brothers development in South Burlington, this is actively being built. So this is a very clear example of those will be units. So these development sites give us a really good window into what's being built. The reason this is really exciting and groundbreaking for us housing folks is we never had a peek into what the private sector was developing. And so now when people ask us, as we build this data out more, we can say, yep, in South Burlington, there's another 32 units that are going to be coming online. Ideally, we'll also be able to say, depending on what we can do with this data, 15 of those will be duplexes, 10 of those will be single family, et cetera. So this is a really exciting opportunity that was really found through this partnership between E911 and ADS. Yeah.
Is there a way to know what percentage are built to be accessible, let's say, people? Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we'd like to add into the data. Are they accessible units? What's the affordability component? Perhaps, all of those things.
Intended for low income or for seniors, right? Or like that data is available somewhere, it has to be integrated.
We'll need to start, I think, incorporating that data into the collection. And it's really going to come down to what can E911 incorporate into their data collection, and what other sources can we continue to layer on top of this. Really, again, kudos to the team, because anytime we've thrown a new possible data set at them, they said, absolutely, we'll find a way to incorporate that. So for everybody on this council, as you think of data sets that you think maybe could be incorporated into the collection here, please mention it to us. We can get it to the team, and they've been really excited by this project. So we've never gotten a no.
Does this count as my mentioning it, or do you want me to send you something?
Well, if you know of an actual data source for those, then
I don't know, but I'll check.
yeah,
Okay.
please, no, let's talk about that. Okay. So again, you can just see here, once we refine these development sites, additional layers on these maps. And when I say layers, I mean the parcel data, town line data, and all sorts of other data that we have on existing atlases will be brought in here. So if we see a development site, we could look on the map on this dashboard and we could see perhaps whether it falls into one of our new exemption areas, or in the future, will it fall into a tier 1A or 1B area? So that could give us some sense of what could be built there. Does this development site overlap with a wetland? Things like that. So we talked about this a bit, and this is just identifying that these are placeholders. So this is really just intended to illustrate how that'll work. Now we're stepping in. You can see across the top here. We're going to another tab now. This is the home sales. So this is just analyzing what the market is doing in Vermont and comparing regions. And so you can see where the activity has been. Really, actually pretty evenly spread activity, but the sales price you can see on the left here. In some areas, specifically following that spine of Vermont around our ski resorts, you can see the higher priced home sales. It's an interesting visual just because there's frequent discussion over the number of second homes in Vermont. And to me, this tells a story that, so you can see the lighter green line is the time to sell a second home over between 2019 and 2024. And then the darker line is how long folks hold on to their primary home. And you can see something change during the pandemic where folks were quicker to sell their second homes. And I think that ties in with other data that we've seen where a lot of folks came here and either their second home that they already owned became their primary home. They moved to Vermont to now permanently live in their second home, or folks who had a second home saw the market and said, let me take advantage of this opportunity to sell that second home. And then that became somebody's primary home that was perhaps coming here from elsewhere. So you can see this tells essentially that same story here. Big increase in other uses to primary residences. The next tab is comparing some of the trends, comparing Vermont to the US, as well as the Northeast. So this was acting listings per 1,000 homes. You can see relative to the Northeast, Vermont throughout the pandemic, before the pandemic, and then even now, had more listings per 1,000 homes. So a lot more people putting homes on the market than our neighbors in the Northeast. Now, this is a really interesting one because, we kind of give ourselves a hard time as maybe we should, to address the need for building more. But this is comparing ourselves to our neighbors here in the Northeast as far as building permits per 1,000 homes. So basically, per 1,000 homes, how many new homes are we creating based on building permit data? And we aren't at the top of the pack, but perhaps we aren't at the bottom either. We're far below the US average in terms of building permits. So what this tells me is that there is somewhat a Northeast problem that we're dealing with, where New Englanders, and I guess I should point to our friends in New York too, we're not building enough. And it has to be noticed that in all those places, there's a significant shortage. But interesting to note that at least since 2020, we've picked up the pace, catching up to our friends in Maine. Again, this is just home price index adjusted for inflation and then mortgage. So really, this is more just telling a story of why the market was so challenging for so many people. And this is something that more and the folks at VHFA talk a lot about, where essentially the buying power of most Vermont families, it's not a unique Vermont issue, but it holds true certainly in Vermont, has really diminished to the point where I think only 13% of our renters right now could afford to buy the median priced home in Vermont. Going back to the new housing units per 1,000 of existing housing stock, so just basically per 1,000 units, how much are we building, comparing our counties. Now, I just want to flag, make sure you read this the right way, because a couple times folks have looked the wrong, the name for the counties at the top of the chart. I've had a couple of people pretty surprised at how much Orange County was building. Nope, that's Chittenden. Again, not surprising, but this is part of the problem. I want to point you all towards Rutland on the right side there, where we know we have a significant challenge. Now there's a huge number of underutilized structures in Rutland County, and that's one thing we need to address, but still areas where we have a housing shortage, including, the NEK over on the left side, we know there's a very low home ownership vacancy rate. There's a slightly healthier rental vacancy rate in parts of the NEK, but a very low home ownership rate. We're not building much up there. And again, this is all relative because this is per 1,000 units in that region. So we're building a lot in Chittenden and Lamoille, which is good. And we need to bring our other counties along. Same data, just different way of looking at it. And viewing it by time, again, Lamoille County, you can just see, have to give them credit. I think a lot of this growth has been in Stowe and Morrisville, but to give credit, they've done a lot. And then just to show, now there's a couple typos on this that have since been corrected on the dashboard itself, so you'll have to forgive that. But this is a long-standing dashboard that ACCD, DHCD has used with our partners in AHS to monitor the housing pipeline as funded by the traditional affordable housing methods through Gus's team, VHIP, and then occasionally there are some other units that don't have, say LIHTC or Gus's in there, but have other affordable sources. So this captures all of those units, including, as you can see, shelters. So this will be available. That is already fairly baked because that's something that we have been actively using for at least over a year now.
Does this tell us how long existing stock stays vacant?
How long existing stock stays vacant? Yeah, sure. So, and by vacant, are you talking about?
I'm saying there's housing available that's not being occupied.
Yeah.
Right. So like in Rutland County, let's say.
Yeah.
And there's lots of reasons for that.
Yeah.
But would we build then?
Yeah.
In that
Yeah.
area if the remaining, the current stock is remaining empty?
Yeah, I mean, so that's certainly something that's taken into account. That's the type of data you'll be able to find on housingdata.org. But what I'll say to that is that's why I think something like VHIP and as well as VHCB funds, rehab, structured rehab, so does CDBG. So we try to focus a lot of our rehabilitation work on, say, a county like Rutland, where we know there are structures there and we just need to bring it back. So I think, thank you for bringing that up, because that's one of the ways this informs our strategy, because you're right. Do we need to build a ton of new structures in Rutland or Rutland Town, Rutland City? No.
So in Rutland, success would be how many sites where we have, whereas in Marshall, maybe it would be how many are built.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly right. And then the last tab, this is another really exciting effort. So there's a national effort that's been underway for a couple of years now to create a zoning atlas. So essentially, this is intended to give insight into where different construction types are legal or permitted in the U.S. So Vermont plugged into a national effort, and there's a story I want to tell here. So for any of the folks that were at the housing conference, you may have had a chance to see the folks, a couple PhD students at UVM actually undertook this effort when they heard that Vermont did not participate yet as of last year in the National Zoning Atlas efforts. But as they went through this process, our folks found that Vermont's zoning and land use laws are a bit peculiar, especially when they tried to work within the framework of the National Zoning Atlas. And as they were walking through how they put together the zoning atlas and the different layers, they found peculiarities that could not fit in the system because we've got 250 something municipalities, all with different zoning and bylaws, some of which are similar but slightly different. And so when trying to compare these one to another, especially under the framework that this national effort had, this group of Vermonters had to go to the national effort and say, we don't fit in this box or this box or this box. And they had to effectively change the framework of the national zoning atlas so that Vermont could fit in the zoning atlas. So it was just a great tale of for the people that Gus's team funds and my team funds, all of our nonprofit and our for-profit developers. When they tell us it's really hard to build in Vermont, that's one of, there's a lot of reasons, but that's one of the reasons it's not easy. When effectively a national zoning atlas effort has to change to accommodate the data for our zoning atlas, I think that's a pretty good signal that it's complex. So anyway, what you'll be able to see here is where can you get a permit without the need for a public hearing for a single family home. So in the burnt orange there, that's what that's showing. And you can see how granular this gets. It'll show you what's permitted, 1, 2, 4 family. In this case, you're seeing an area where quadplexes are prohibited under the zoning. But you can also see, where is multifamily permitted without public hearing. So the zoning atlas is a standalone resource. I can send out a link for that later if folks have an interest, but that's also going to be incorporated in here. So the idea is somebody could come to this dashboard and see not just what's being built, but also what's been sold, what's moving the market, what could be built by using the zoning atlas. And ideally, other layers will get brought in here so that folks can, like I said, look at where are these interim exemption areas that we've talked about as a result of Act 181. Once we get through the future land use mapping, where will the tier 1A and 1B areas be where ideally more construction will happen, et cetera. All right. So that was a lot of housing data. I hope people are excited by that and not put to sleep. But we're not far off though. So hang tight, and once this goes live, we'll make sure that everyone sees it. Yeah, Dave.
Thanks, Alex. I do think this is actually incredibly exciting, and the use cases are numerous, and I think that's probably what will garner even more attention, is that once it's ready, to be able to put it into practical application and be able to see that kind of data impacting decisions, and then how those decisions then roll out and impact Vermonters at large. The ICA Institute Community Alliance does the HMIS data in the state of Vermont. And, there's some dashboards out there. Just curious about your thoughts around reflecting some information regarding people experiencing homelessness. The last statement you made was really about a one-stop shop for people to be able to go and see these multiple different tabs. And you were talking about targets, and you were talking about kind of how those targets are created. And I just wonder about the ability to kind of reflect that data, and if it would tell a long-term story about, hey, as things change around units, maybe then we'd be able to see the impact of that around folks experiencing homelessness within the state down the road.
Yeah, I think that's going to be critical to bring in. I'll say some of that data exists on housingdata.org. And so that's all the more reason that Maura's team and the team at the state have been working closely to make sure that these two things work together, and folks can, whether they're hosted on the same spot or folks can toggle between them, we're going to make sure that these two sites talk and are able to sort of be compared and used together. And yeah, Dave, I mean, I think that, like I said, that is one data source that can and should be brought in. But as folks think of more, please, we want more insights. So make suggestions.
That's fantastic. I'll definitely connect with you on that.
Thanks, Dave. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts or questions on that before we move on to other agenda items? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for indulging me there. I'm a former data analyst, so anytime I can dive into data, I get to feel like I'm coming back home. All right. Why don't we open up? Yeah, home and data. Yeah. Why don't we? That's nice pun. Why don't we open up to public comment? We're a couple minutes late, but hopefully that means that any of our members of the public have joined. Anybody here that's not a council member that wishes to share anything in public comment? Does anybody wish to have Gus Seelig recite poetry? Okay, I'm Gus. Just kidding. I won't do that to you. Okay, hearing nothing for public comment, we can go ahead and close public comment at 9:47. I believe we are now at the point in the agenda where we get to hear from our esteemed subcommittee chairs. Why don't I start with Mr. Regal?
Thank you, sir. So the Special Population Subcommittee has been hard at work. We've spent a lot of our time, I guess we're really talking about September, October, and November at this point. So we established a trajectory at our meeting in September and really tried to figure out what do we want to spend our time on this year, and how do we prepare for the tactical action plan update in September of 2025 in a way that is sustainable in terms of the work and really, kind of well thought out and intentional. So September, we kind of set that plan. October and November, working on, kind of an evaluation of a process that would allow us to determine where the highest levels of opportunity would be. And then starting in January, we're taking those highest level of opportunity areas, and small groups within the subcommittee are working with experts out in our communities to bring together, small presentations of, say, 30 to 45 minutes at each one of our meetings between January and I think it's July. And we'll take 30 to 45 minutes for those presentations for the subcommittee to be able to understand. Also asking those small groups that are kind of organizing those presentations to come with maybe a few potential recommendations that the group can wrestle with. And then we'll have a discussion following the presentations about what that could look like. And then, have the opportunity over the course of the next month for those small groups to go back and tighten up potential recommendations and dig into any questions that may exist from the subcommittee. And then our goal, the following month's meeting will wrap up with sort of a decision point on the previous month's topic. So that as we roll through the course of the year, by the time we get to August, we will be finalizing the July topic, and then we will really be looking at all of our recommendations, putting final touches on things. If there is some culling that needs to be done, or if the full council decides that we're going to try to limit each subcommittee to a certain number of them, we'll do that evaluation at that point. But hopefully it puts us coming into September without a tremendous sense of urgency at that stage of the game. So trying to hold space for that. So right now we're in the process. We have our January and February topics established, and small groups are already working on those areas. And then we'll send out a survey to the rest of our folks that'll establish the priority topics for the remainder of the year. And in January, we'll assign those out to small groups. So that's what we've been doing over the last few months, and that's the trajectory moving forward, leading up to the update for the 2025 Tactical Action Plan in September from the Special Population Subcommittee. And happy to have, if I missed anything or misrepresented anything, Adnan and Chad VJ have been helping to co-chair the subcommittee with me, and been, certainly taking on a fair amount of responsibility in that area. So just want to recognize their time and contributions.
Great. Yeah, I like firstly that that's a very methodical approach, but also what I've enjoyed is that there's outreach. So the housing unit generation subcommittee has often had folks come and present to us, but I like that you are also sending your folks out and reaching out to folks in the community. So that's really great. Anyone else from the Special Population Subcommittee that wants to chime in on their work or what they see as the vision going forward? Because Dave did such a good job. Nobody has anything to add.
I just want to say it's a fantastic plan.
Yeah.
It's an excellent operational plan to get them out into the community and to
Absolutely.
focus on some of these areas that are often not a focus area. So that's great.
Right.
And I think it's just an excellent plan. So very pleased to hear it.
Nice
Thank
job.
you. Like I said, the committee gets all the credit, that's for sure. They're doing the heavy lifting. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, could I just ask, how many different kinds of special populations have you identified that we should all be thinking about?
Yeah, there's a long list, Gus, and I think right now we're culling that down. We're really focused on about 7 is what we're going to try to pull together for presentation. So just a flavor, the first one in January is going to be families with children. And then the population that we're going to focus on in February is going to be older Vermonters, medically vulnerable, like medical respite type area of focus. And so, the subcommittee will be taking a survey here later in December that will identify, I think, the other 5 that'll fill up the remaining months.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you're trying to group into sort of groups with like needs. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and it's really about this idea of educating and trying to focus our presentations that come into the subcommittee around not just all the great work that's going on out there, but really focused on what are the opportunities. What can this council put forward as a recommendation that will improve the overall lives and experience of Vermonters broadly. And for us, it's about special populations. I would say similar to last year, I am sure there are going to be things that come up within our subcommittee that really tie in deeply, similar to Commissioner Bowen's comment earlier around the units and like what units are available for which populations. we will inevitably have some things that apply to both the other subcommittees that we'll want to flag for you all as part of the process, but we will try to keep our recommendations really focused on, you know, the special populations and the things we see as areas of opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, anything else on special populations? Okay, I'll pass it over to Commissioner Winters.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Dave. It's good to hear what the Special Populations Subcommittee is up to, and it's just a reminder for my subcommittee, the Supports and Services Subcommittee, to keep better tabs on what's going on there, because there's a lot of crossover there with populations with special needs. What are the supports and services that they do need? And so that can fit together very nicely. Our subcommittee has worked over the last 3 months or so on some priorities from the tactical action plan, including permanent supportive housing, building off the SASH model, a SASH for all model, connecting provider services more effectively. So we did have outside presentations, experts from some people actually on our subcommittee presenting on each of those subjects, and so there are recommendations in this year's update to the tactical action plan on that. We also want to spend more time on rental subsidies and landlord relief as two other areas that could use some focus and discussion. We've started to dive into those, but I expect we would do more of that in the coming year. I think we do need to organize our work in the way that the other subcommittee is thinking about, so that we have that 6-month view and are ready to update the tactical action plan. I also like the idea of getting more into the community to find out what the needs are. We have a lot of that representation on our subcommittee, but hearing more from folks outside of the subcommittee, I think, is a good way to go and to inform our work. So we don't have specific plans for calendar year 2025, but that's next up on our agenda, I would imagine. And I'd like to welcome anyone from the Supports and Services Subcommittee to chime in here on anything I've missed, the work that we've done, or the direction you see us going in the coming year.
Yeah, Will.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm on both of those subcommittees, and to Dave's point around the crossover between the two, it has been really striking in looking through the different special populations, what resources are available to those populations. We've been able to identify some gaps, and I think as we kind of dive more into those specifics, that can really help inform what we're doing at the services subcommittee as well. So I just wanted to kind of re-emphasize that point that both Commissioner Winters and Dave made.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's when we've been able to have folks serving on multiple committees, or at least checking in with another subcommittee, that's yielded some really good results and coordination. Okay, anything else from Supports and Services? Okay.
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So to talk a bit about the Unit Generation Subcommittee. So as we did last year, my vision for this year is to continue to invite experts, both in development and in both nonprofit, for-profit, as well as other stakeholders, to come and present to the subcommittee. For the last two tactical action plans that helped yield some of our recommendations, I think there were some that we wanted to include anyway, but that at least helped round out our recommendations. So the vision going forward for that subcommittee is to continue to do that, bring experts in from the field. Now, I have sort of informally acted as like to update anyone who's not paying close attention to the State House, update them on the progress in the State House. I say that because everything that's been included in our tactical action plans has been either at the core of the State House discussions or has been addressed in some way or another in the recent legislation. So what we include in the tactical action plan really needs to somewhat be informed by and reactive to what happens in the State House. We don't want to include a recommendation that by September has become moot. So luckily, most of the people on that subcommittee keep a pretty close eye on things in the State House, but it's just good to make sure that we stay on top of that. So anyway, so that's the one side of it, is I want to continue to bring folks in to talk with us and present what they see as the needs for improving the construction and home building environment in Vermont. The other side is I really want this subcommittee to really continue to dive into the data. I see this subcommittee as being closely tied in with the target and progress towards those targets, that work. So fortunately, I think by the time we have our next subcommittee meeting, we should have some live housing targets and a dashboard to walk through. So that'll give the subcommittee some specifics to work through, whereas we've kind of been working off of just the best data at our disposal, and so we weren't really able to include any targets in past tactical action plans. So a little bit more data involved in the subcommittee's work this year than in past, but continuing the outreach that we've done. Anyone from the Youth Generation Subcommittee want to chime in with their thoughts on that or other things we ought to be doing? Okay. So that it's actually a nice segue into our next topic. Commissioner Winters and I and some of the team here have discussed possibly wanting to give ourselves, and some of this is already handled by the subcommittees themselves, but starting to give the council some internal deadlines to have our work presented back to the rest of the council, so that we know we're not running into this now that this is technically our first 12 months as between tactical action plans, so that we can be methodical about when and how we report to one another, and so we're finalizing the report in by the end of September. So we have, I think we do have some thoughts on potential deadlines, but I want to open it up to the council. So maybe I'll pass it to Commissioner Winters, but first, we had internally discussed perhaps we set a mid-August deadline for subcommittees to finalize their recommendations. The thought there was, especially for the Unit Generation Subcommittee, we wanted to give ourselves ample time between the end of the session and our sort of first draft of our report. It's going to be hard for us to know where exactly we're going to land until we see where the legislature lands, because there's a couple topics that were just included in this last tactical action plan that it sure looks like are going to be topics of discussion at during the session. So mid-August for sort of a first draft to present to the full council is sort of my first proposal, but I'll look to Commissioner Winters for thoughts, and then I want to open it up to the council.
No, Alex, I think that's right. It's all in the timing of budget development and legislative policy development. So things kind of slid this year with, me chairing one subcommittee coming in with the last recommendations kind of late. We do want to make sure we get out ahead of it so that the recommendations are both useful and not obsolete by the time that we make them. So setting some deadlines here makes some sense.
And thanks, Kristen, for reminding us in the chat there. It looks like, is that town meeting week, March 11th?
I think it's the week before town meeting.
Oh, okay. But that's decent timing. So March 11th will be the next council meeting. At that point, we'll have a good sense of what is brewing in the legislature. will be past crossover at that point. So I think at least directionally we'll know what, at least for unit generation, I can speak for that subcommittee, we'll know what topics are going to be included in legislation. So hopefully by that meeting, subcommittees will have a pretty good sense of how their report is going to be shaping up. Does that make sense for us to establish an internal policy of say a mid-August due date for subcommittees? Okay. I hear no opposition, so I don't think there's a need for a formal vote. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. So that'll be our deadline. Sounds like subcommittees have their own cadences established. Did I have anything else I wanted to mention on that? No, that was everything. Okay.
So Alex, does that mean that the full board meeting, the full council meeting in September will be like an official codifying of the tactical action plan, and then we'll submit it after that? Is that the game plan?
Thanks, Dave. Yes, that's my thinking, is if we can have everything submitted mid-August, that gives our staff, because we know it's quite a bit of legwork for them to bring things together, and well, I say them and us to bring things together and bring it to a cohesive report. So yes, I'd like to give us that month, so then we can vote for approval at the September.
So that actually moves up the plan that had been laid out by a couple of subcommittees by a month.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like to me, is instead of landing and summarizing by September, they would have to do that by August.
I think that's, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's going to be okay on our side. We can make the internal adjustments to make that happen.
You can. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. All right. And I'm seeing nodding from Chris too. Good. All right. All right, everybody. Did I hit on all of we covered the next full council meeting? Oh, yes, thank you. Before we adjourn here, any topics that you either folks want to bring up now for the next full council meeting, or if you can't think of anything now, you can always shoot a message to Chris or I or Dave or Kristen. But just while we're here, anything that folks either want to discuss now or bring up for the next council meeting? Yeah, Kelly.
I'm curious, and we don't have to discuss it now, but I'm curious if there's anything coming from the federal level with the upcoming change in administration, whether you're hearing anything on the federal housing front.
Hearing things, but mostly speculation, hard to react to. Kathleen, you're a little more plugged in on the federal level than I am. Is there anything solid that you want to share, or is it all still speculation?
Yeah, good morning. I mean, certainly speculation, but earlier this week, we did receive a formal letter from Housing and Urban Development, really putting us on notice that likely our funding for 2025 would at best be level funded, and to begin planning accordingly, and could in fact be reduced. So something we're watching very carefully, a lot of speculation. We're still operating under a continuing resolution until December 20th. There's a lot of speculation that in fact we'll be operating under a continuing resolution for perhaps through April. And perhaps even beyond. And then certainly if it's beyond April, there are even more significant ramifications because of just spending levels and so on and so forth. So a lot of speculation, and we're monitoring it closely, and we'll certainly communicate a better message once we have a better sense of what that message is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But good point, Kelly. I think that's probably a good item for the March agenda, maybe just a federal update. Yeah, Angus.
Good morning. Hey, thanks. As we think about the next year, if there's still room to throw out this idea, I know a lot of our solutions are going to be about identifying good existing programs and approaches to serving people, to developing new housing for them, and then because the need is so great, to growing those programs. And I'm wondering if either the full council or some subgroup of it could also take that look at sort of at the why, and if need continues to increase at the level we've been observing, could we ever really build and serve our way out of the crisis, or do we need to look at other features of the Vermont services landscape that might need to be updated? I'm speaking vaguely because I don't really want to advocate any one solution here or any one problem, but I think this council is composed in a way that it could look at that, look at those trends, and sort of try to get ahead. I guess you could call this some sort of prevention. I know upstream prevention is complicated and hard to pull off, but I'd love to figure out a way that we can have fewer people without housing because of whatever their background is. I know that's really vague. Sorry. I'm trying to make room for that, either on a subcommittee or on the full council. Thanks.
I guess actually, I think that's great, and I need to look back at the EO. I think that is actually one of the things we're tasked with as well. But I wish normally Chief Prevention Officer Monica Hutt attends these meetings. She was conflicted today and couldn't join us, but yeah, Angus, if you and maybe others are interested in pursuing that conversation, seeing where that could fit in with either our current subcommittees or perhaps an additional subcommittee, I think Monica would be eager to lead that effort. Since that's what a lot of her work focuses on now. So thanks for that.
Yeah, it just makes me think that barriers to rental, barriers to mortgage, right? Like things that are blocking people because of their background, not just their income, but also their background. To what extent reentry from correctional settings is a challenge or an issue, and just the interaction of affordability, which is sprinkled throughout everything that you're saying, but wasn't sort of intentionally said. The subsidies, the rental subsidies, and the landlord really may end up being a bigger focus of a committee like this, versus the building, depending on what the funding shifts happen in the next year.
Yeah,
just thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's all right. And part of that to me is where I think it's important for both special populations and services supports to continue to interact with the unit generation so that it's all being taken into account. Okay, thank you. Okay, other thoughts? All right, everybody. Well, as we always aim to, we did not use up our full time to 11. So good work, everybody, on that. So seeing there's no other business on the agenda, I'll hear a motion from somebody to adjourn.
I'll move.
I'll consider that a motion and a second by Kim. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Adios.
Thanks, folks. Take care.
Take care, all.
Thanks. It was a good meeting.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
It was fun. This is